Hello and welcome to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther. This is Lilo. And today I've done some posts on it, and in my Winter Sowing 101 video I did an episode on how to protect your seedlings on freezing nights. Well, we're going to get a deep freeze tonight and tomorrow night. That deep freeze in the US is below 28 degrees, and that's the temperature at which a lot of even frost-hardy plants, frost-hardy annuals especially, really can't handle below 28. That's for both vegetables and flowers. And the sun is coming out, isn't it, Lilo? So I thought I would show you what I do when I'm trying to protect my seedlings when the temperature is forecasted to get in the low to in the low 20s. I'm going to be talking about how to protecting winter sowing containers. That's these types of containers out here. The vast majority of my seedlings have actually already sprouted in the jugs. And this is the time of year when you do need to be a little more aware of the nighttime temperatures and protect your plants on nights when it's going to be freezing. If it's only in the low 30s or even high 20s, you really are fine just putting a blanket on them, following what I recommended. But there are additional steps you can take if you're worried that the temperature is going to be way too low. Now, inside the jugs, it's usually 10 to 15 degrees warmer than outside. It's a nice greenhouse effect. So the plants will already be somewhat protected if they're sealed up, right, with the duct tape and all of that. But at nighttime, when the sun goes away and there's nothing to sort of help heat the jugs, that's when the temperatures can start to go down a little. And so you have a couple of options. First of all, right now, my containers are spread all over the place because I was like pulling out the ones that have sprouted and the ones that haven't. You do not have to cover any containers that have not sprouted, but I find that putting them all together and putting the unsprouted ones on the outside helps create additional insulation for the ones that have sprouted. So I like to cover them all together. When you cover plants, cover them in the evening, at dark or before dark, and overnight. And then in the morning when the sun comes out and can warm up the containers, you can uncover them again. They will be warmer. If you stick your finger down in a jug, you will see that it's quite warmer. These glasses get really dark even on a cloudy day. And hopefully my dog isn't doing business in the background like she was in the last video. The other thing is, please do not take your containers inside. It's an unnecessary step. I haven't tested it personally, but I have heard that it can actually cause some shock for the plants. And once they're used to the warm indoor temperatures, they need to get used to the cold again, and you're basically going to have to harden them off to bring them back outside. So you're creating extra work for yourself, whereas just putting a blanket over them and possibly some hot water bottles will do the trick. All right, so let me show you what I do. Well, for starters, if you've already started opening up some containers to get them ready for transplanting, you're going to want to cover them back up. So in this case, I'm going to just flip the lid back on. Luckily it's not, this is my romaine Paris Island lettuce, and I'm just real careful when I put it back on. I'm gonna do it on this so I don't mess it up. I'm just real careful. I just kind of bring them in to the extent you can. Try to keep them in there. And you do not necessarily need to tape them up. If you're really worried, you could run a piece of tape. Like if you have a hard time getting the lid to stay on, you could put a piece of tape. Now I will put these untaped ones in the center of the group of containers that I'm covering. So now I'm going to go cover the other ones. I have bridal tool covering some of the containers that I had opened, and they include Chinese broccoli, my kale, my cabbage, things like that, because you don't want the butterfly that lays the cabbage worm eggs on the plants to get in there before you transplant them. So this is a way of making sure they're protected. Now I am going to cover with bridal tool when I transplant them as well, but if I have them open, they get covered. You might hear my dogs playing in the background. They can sound aggressive, but they're being silly butts. What you girls doing? Are you being silly butts? What I do next is I go through the different plants I have and I sort through whether they're a cold tolerant plant or not. And I'm going to try to put the sprouted jugs of tomatoes and peppers and things that can't handle the cold, I'm going to try to situate them in the middle. So all these big clear containers of tomatoes, I'm going to put right in the center of this group. And you want everything to be tucked real tight together because that helps reduce the amount of air that gets through. Okay, so this is kale. So this can handle being on the end. Let's see. You're leeks, you're a type of onion, you can handle being on the end. What are you? You're a lettuce, you can also handle being on the end. Yeah. I think we're getting to the non-cold hardy things. Okay. This is old German tomatoes. You're gonna go on the inside. Calendula, that is a frost hardy flower. Oops. Any jugs that haven't sprouted, you can also put on the outside. Let's see, this is basil. Basil is not a frost hardy plant. So now I need to find a place to put these tomatoes and this pepper. And I'm gonna move it to the middle. The next thing you're going to do is find a couple of winter sowing containers that you haven't drilled holes in the bottom of yet and that you still have the lids for. And I always like to save like 3 or 4 for the end of the year, and I can use them next year if I don't use them this time. So you're gonna wanna get hot tap water, and I just fill it up. I don't have an exact ratio on how many you're gonna need per number of jugs, but I try to make sure there's at least one. If, you know, I have probably 85 jugs out there right now, containers out there right now. So I'm probably gonna do 4, just make sure I kind of have one on each side of the square-ish shape that I've formed. And you're gonna tuck these in under the blankets. I'm gonna grab a couple of tea towels to wrap these guys in because that helps reduce their pace of cooling. So now I just take the containers outside that are full of hot water, I put the tea towels around them, and I sort of snuggle them in around the edges. Now here's 2 containers that I also filled with hot water, and I'm going to come back and cover them with tea towels in a few minutes. To cover the jugs, I start off with a heavy blanket that you tuck in as close to the ground as you can to reduce the amount of air. In fact, I see a little bit on the side there I'm going to have to pull down. And then I'm also using, for this end, this is a slightly lighter blanket, so I'm actually going to put a second sort of heavier blanket that will help insulate them. Adding a tarp on top isn't absolutely necessary, but I believe and have experienced that a tarp helps sort of reduce the wind being able to get through the blankets if your blankets aren't really like heavy duty, and if it ends up snowing or raining or sleeting, that it also helps the blankets stay warm and dry. Here I'm anchoring sort of all the edges down with something, whether it's a like metal pole or a brick or a stone or like a little container that isn't job. So you want to make sure like sort of every side is tucked in. So if the wind comes, it won't blow the tarp off. So I did this last time. It was really cold. Like it was sleeting, it was wet, it was overcast. It was switching from rain to snow, and it was going to get down, it was forecast to get down to 18 degrees. And I said, well, I need to do something beyond just a blanket. That the sides of the sort of covered area that I hadn't put the hot water bottles, the bottles filled with hot water, actually had ice condensation on the outside and on the ground around them. Whereas the other side, they were just nice and damp and really happy. So I definitely know that this helps. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it, and stick around, because if the weather actually behaves, I'll be able to do my next video on how to transplant seedlings.
Now a quick glance at how my spring hyacinths look.